This episode of the Model 3 Owners Club podcast is brought to you by Duliban Insurance. If you live in Ontario, Canada, and are looking for the best price and coverage on your Tesla, give Duliban a call at 1-855-385-4226 or visit our website at dulibaninsurance.com/Tesla. Hey everyone, welcome again to another episode of the Model 3 Owners Club podcast. I'm Trevor Page, your host, and we have a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to be talking about some new features coming to Summon or Advanced Summon. We're going to be talking about Tesla's financials that happened last week, and we have some other information regarding some loss of regen, some other things that are going on. But before we get into that, I want to bring on my guests. Joining me from Montreal is Mr. Ian Pavelko. Ian, how are you doing this evening, my friend?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Bonsoir tout le monde.
Great. Well, it's always nice to have a fellow Canadian on the show, but that's not all. We also have Mr. Eric Camacho from Florida. How are you doing, Eric?
Doing well, gentlemen. Hello, everybody.
Great. Thank you for joining us as usual. Now, the other guest that normally joins us, Mr. Michael Bodner, is not joining us this evening. And we're just going to basically put it out there. He's decided that he wants to spend more of his efforts on building his YouTube channel, which is great. We fully encourage that. It doesn't preclude him from joining the podcast in the future. As a matter of fact, we have something planned very early in the new year. So you may see Michael come on once in a while and stuff. So all the best to you, Michael. Thanks for the nice kudos that you gave us on your little show. So if you want, you should actually check out his channel. It's Tesla Tunity. He's doing a weekly show as well about Tesla news, and he's off to a really good start. He has 2 episodes now. So all the best to you, Michael. We'll be following, and don't forget to to subscribe to his channel. So all the best to Michael on that. But last but not least, we have a very special guest coming onto the show tonight. Now, if you're on Twitter, you might have seen some of his tweets. He's the author of the Tesla internet sensation, Frunk Puppy Fridays. I want to bring the Earl of Frunk Puppy himself onto the show, Mr. Earl Banning. Thanks for joining us again, Earl. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing great, Trev. Thanks so much for having me on. Welcome to Frunk Puppy Studios here. You see that there?
I love it.
That's awesome.
Very professional now.
Is that your official logo now?
Yeah, I think it's going to be. We'll see. We got a couple more.
That's
some
awesome.
really terrible ones out there on the internet we're voting on. But
well, your little thing with
the...
I was going to say your thing with the front puppy thing. Why do I keep saying puppy? I must be in Ottawa. I'm thinking about hockey or something. Right?
Canada.
Yeah. By the way, if you notice that my studio is a little different tonight, it's because I'm at friends. We're in Ottawa tonight, so I brought my portable studio with me. So I apologize for that. Maybe the production quality may not be as usual, but hey,
home of the Senators.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Hey, somebody's knowledgeable. Well, having said that, we've got to jump into some of this stuff because the financials thing is really going to overwhelm us. But before I get into that, I want to put out a little bit of a PSA because on the forums and on the internet right now, there is a lot of discussion about the loss of regen that seems to be happening in the northern climates on Model 3. And reached out to Tesla, and I got an official response about the regen situation. So I'm just going to read a little bit back of what they gave back to me. Tesla says, in regards to the loss of regen braking after a recent tire swap, they're talking about people that have swapped their tires. The tires that have been put on the vehicles are not Tesla specific. The Model 3 was made so that it fits and is more specific to Tesla branded tires, in quotes, now that they have Pirelli Soto Zeros for the winter. So they're talking about people that didn't buy the tire package from Tesla here. So they say the vehicle needs to relearn and recalibrate to understand the tread, grip, and difference of the new tires on the vehicle. It will take almost 500 kilometers of driving on these tires for the vehicle to recalibrate and start using the regen again. It will take some time for you to experience a loss of regen braking for the... let me start over. It will take some time, so you will experience a loss of regen braking for the time being. It will eventually come back. Continue to drive and use the brakes. The regen will return after the car has learned and sensed these new tires that have been placed on the car. If you have any questions, let us know. They also said, if you have some kind of strange setup with wheels, tires, or TPMS, to please call Tesla's service and let them know your specific combination because they'd like to put that into their database system for tracking. Now, we had a little discussion just before the show started here, and Ian has a few points, I think, that you wanted to throw in here because, I mean, you're the tire guy. So what are your thoughts on this thing?
Yeah, first off, I got to say that I am a little bit late to the party. I know the discussions have been going on in the forum, and I haven't been able to join in because, hey, guess what? It's the first week of November, and my business is going absolutely off the rails. So I have to do this work thing. It sort of cuts in on the fun. But I will give you my 30-second version of it. My first reaction is this is really peculiar. First off, because we've never seen this on Model S or X, regardless of the wheel or tire combination that you use, the regen on those cars has worked very consistently. Obviously, it's got to have something to do with the partial permanent magnet motor on the Model 3 and the way that it looks at regen. It's obviously a lot more sensitive. The only thing I can sort of attribute it to is I'm looking at some of the combinations, and the ones that seem most effective are lower speed rated winter tires. And what I think might be going on here is what's called tread squirm, and that is the fact that the tread blocks tend to move around a little bit more. And when you start to regen, that slight delay or the hesitation in the tread movement might be picked up by the motors. I'm absolutely amazed that they would pick up on that. And what they're probably doing is detecting what they think is tire slip, which it isn't. It's just that the block tends to move a little bit compared to the all-season tires, or in the case of the performance car, the summer tire that comes on the car. So obviously that's triggering something in the regen that says, whoa, wait a second, I better back off. Because if it does detect slip as if it was on rain or ice or snow or something, normally that would cause it to back off. I think anybody who's driven one in the snow and, really hammered the brakes, you feel the regen come off. The car goes, nope, back off. I want to get grip again. So on a very minor scale, that seems to be what's happening. We're going to have to follow this closely. I love that Tesla wants to get all the data on the different wheel and tire setups that are being used. I will tell you, with other OEMs, if anything like this happens, typically it's like, hey, you didn't use the tire we recommended, sorry, you're out of luck. I love that they're taking a different approach and saying, oh, please tell us what you have, we'll log that, and then they're probably looking at the data from the car, and that'll help them to learn in future to better adapt to it. That's sort of what I can gather so far, but I'll be looking into it much more heavily, even running some tests probably as the season goes, and I'll try and keep everybody informed on what I discover.
Yeah, it's a marked difference because, Tesla just sent out another software update to the Model 3 fleet that adjusted the regen. They actually made it stronger, which is the first time. I've never seen that on the Model S or Model X. They've never really played with the regen. Now, I don't know if that's a software thing specifically on those cars or it was kind of baked in, but we've seen so many changes on Model 3. It's just, this is a different animal altogether. So, if they're spending more time on the software situation with Model 3 and really correcting things, I think it really bodes well for the future to keep improvements on this car going. This thing really has legs. So,
So are we supposed to replace our tires through Tesla? Is that what they're saying to do? Or?
No, they're just saying, based on their situation, if you want immediate regen, you should be using their tire package, but there's nothing precluding you from not using their tire package. Their official statement, as far as I'm concerned, is what they gave us, is that, you just got to give us time because we're doing something different this time around. I find it unfortunate that we have to try and pull this information out of Tesla rather than being a little bit more proactive in giving this, but at least we have some kind of answer. So, we'll keep an eye on it. But like anything else, if you have some kind of weird setup or whatever, please take Tesla's advice and call the service center, let them know. The more data we give them, the better the cars will be, over time.
I have a question. I live in Florida. What is this winter you speak of?
I don't know. I have no idea. It's just something that happens, 6 months of the year, and it is what it is. All right, moving on. I want to talk a little bit about some Elon tweets because, a show would not be a show without some tweets from Elon. Today, he really got on Twitter and started talking a little bit about some other features that are coming to Autopilot, specifically something called Advanced Summon. Now, if you look at the Tesla website talks about Smart Summon, and that is the ability of the car to be able to navigate its environment and avoid obstacles. Now, everybody knows about Summon. You press the key fob or your app, whatever, and you can move the car out of a parking space or into a parking space, move the car a few feet, whatever. But they've been long talking about the ability to be able to move the car, say, from a parking garage and maybe come around and meet you up front or whatever. But today we got more information. Elon said that the next change to Summon is coming in approximately 6 weeks. That's Elon time. So who knows what that will actually be. But he basically said that the car will drive to your phone location and follow you like a pet if you hold down the Summon button on the Tesla app. Ooh, that's interesting. And in a subsequent tweet, in this little thread that he had going, he said also you'll be able to drive it from your phone remotely like a big RC car, in as long as the car's in line of sight. That I take it to use your phone kind of like a game and move the car around. He also said that the car will have a park seek mode, where the car will be able to go into a parking lot and find its own parking space. Now that is, I find interesting, because the only time I ever heard Elon actually mention those words specifically, now I'm using park seek mode, he didn't really necessarily call it that, but that's what I'm calling it, was when they originally announced the dual motor Model S back, I think it was late 2014. He said, just kind of off quip, eventually, the car will be able to go find its own parking space. So this is the first time I've seen him actually mention this again. And I had to reach out. I reached out to him on Twitter. Unfortunately, I didn't get a response back from him, but I wanted clarification because lately they seem to be talking, some new features are coming. It's going to be full self-driving. So to me, it was just like, well, is this a feature that's coming that requires full self-driving, or is it enhanced autopilot? I think if it comes to enhanced autopilot, it's even bonus. It's even better. I would love to have that feature. I know, Eric, you want to say a couple words about that here in a moment. I'm leaning towards that actually happening towards enhanced autopilot and not necessarily full self-driving. It just seems to me that in some ways the lines are getting a little more blurred as to really what full self-driving is. Now, they did take it off the website in terms of ordering it when you buy the car. You can still order it off the menu. We talked about that before. What are your thoughts, guys? I want you to jump in on this and just let us know what you think about this new announcement or capability that's coming in a few months.
Well, first of all, praise be to the all-powerful Elon. I think it's a great thing. I think there are a lot of people, and we talked about this pre-show, that I think a lot of people who don't have enhanced autopilot, if they find out that this is in fact a feature as part of the autopilot suite, they're going to quickly say, you know what, it's worth getting it just for that alone. Because for those of us that live in very sultry or humid climates like here in Florida, when it rains, it's a great opportunity to just have your car come pick you up like it's an Uber or a Lyft ride, which is fantastic. I think the hardware and the software combination, the fact that they keep adding these features to EAP and able to make it more robust, more feature filled, is something I think is really the most impressive part of this. And, if they're able to get this set up, and again, whether it's 6 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is, if it finally comes out in the coming months and it rolls out in small batches at first, which I would expect it to do so they can see how the real world data is, and then goes more widespread after that, it's a really, really big thing. So I'd love to hear what Ian and Earl think, but it's to me, it may be one of the most popular features of EAP.
I absolutely agree. I got really excited about it when I saw the tweet. And in my opinion, it seems like it would be included under EAP. I'm not really sure. I'm one of the people who threw down the extra money to add full self-driving. But I do wonder how they'll work that in. And Eric, I hadn't thought about that, but what a great selling point for EAP to be able to have that feature. But yeah, I think it might be included. Not sure. I don't know. What do you think, Ian?
I sure hope so.
Mm-hmm.
It does sound to me like a very full self-driving-ish feature. As a guy who didn't order that, I'm really hoping it's an EAP thing. But I wouldn't be horribly disappointed if it's strictly FSD, because let's face it, you're having the car drive around the parking lot pretty much on its own with no one in the seat. That's very FSD-ish to me. So I'm leaning towards thinking that's what it is. But to your point, Eric, if you think that that's a cool feature to have in the big Florida rains when it's 20 below zero outside, you really want that feature. It's like, oh, hell yeah.
I'm sorry, what is this 20 below you speak of? I'm not familiar with this.
I give it a few years. Climate change, it'll catch up with you.
Okay.
It's coming from a guy who lives on the surface of the sun 6 months of the year too. So
yes,
right.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. EAP is one of those things. When I talk to people, aside from the fact that I say things like, well, the car does lane keeping really well and it does lane changes, and now we have Navigate on Autopilot, which, by the way, if anybody's listening, is not available in Canada yet. I think it's a regulatory thing. I don't know that 100%, but that's one of the reasons I don't think we have seen it yet. If I find out more, I will let you know as soon as possible. That when I talk to people, I do happen to mention, if I try and remember, is the fact about Park Seek mode. Eventually, and I say it like that, eventually we will be able to get out of the car, press a button, and the car will go find its own parking space. And for a lot of people, it's just like their mind's completely blown on that. And I agree. Summon is not something I use too much, but Summon for parking, bring it on. I want that.
Yeah, and the reason why I think it's going to be more for EAP than it is for FSD, and for those of you that don't understand, Tesla loves TLAs, three-letter anagrams. So acronyms, yeah. So the reason why I think it's more for EAP is that we don't have full self-driving yet. So if this is coming in the next 6 weeks or so, it stands to reason it's got to be a feature of EAP. It's just taking auto summon and just upping it a notch. While I understand Ian's perspective that it may be at some point, depending upon conditions and locations and other stuff, that maybe it might be expanded even further from an FSD perspective, I think really this initial version of it is probably slated for EAP.
Mm-hmm.
And for the record, I want to be wrong. That's actually why I'm making this prediction. So I can be proven wrong, and I will get it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to the point of the show where we're just going to dive in here, and we're just going to get into some of these financials that Tesla announced last week. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you probably heard by now that after 15 years, Tesla is finally profitable. It's been a long time coming for these guys. So we're just going to rattle off some of the numbers a little bit here, and we're going to kind of dive in and discuss some of the things that were talked about during the earnings call, which, by the way, I'll put a link in the video or the podcast description where you can actually listen to it on your own. There are transcripts available as well. I'll link those. We have those on our forum. Right. So the big one, GAAP, generally accepted accounting practices. Tesla has a net income of $312 million. Incredible growth because, yes, thank you. Sound effects. Sorry, I don't have sound effects, but I have to rely on the other guests in here. To put that into perspective, in June, at the end of the last quarter, they had a loss of I think it was around $21 million. So it's almost a $1 billion reversal on this. And of course, we're talking about Model 3. I mean, it's profitable because they finally got the volume up. All right, moving on here. Operating income, $417 million and an operating margin of about 6.1%. Awesome, really good numbers. Free cash flow, this is a big one, $881 million supported by operating cash flow of $1.4 billion. Huge increase. They also have $3 billion of cash and cash equivalents on Q3 end. Now, the shorts have been making a lot of noise about the fact that Tesla was burning cash to the point where they wouldn't have money at the end of the quarter or even by the end of the year. Well, that's not true. They were actually cash flush. Interestingly enough, I think some of the noisiest shorts out there, namely Jim Chanos, has disappeared off of CNN. Anyway, moving along. Model 3 has gross margins of over 20%. That's crazy. They're actually making some serious coin on this car. Now, again, we're talking about higher ASPs because they are building the performance cars, the all-wheel drive long-range variant, of course, now, and the mid-range car. The base model is still not here yet. Elon made a very big point of the fact that they're not intentionally withholding the standard range Model 3. It's just that their processes and their costs are not to the point yet where they can actually release the car. That is going to be coming very early in the year, probably around January, if I remember correctly. In the financial call, some other parts that came up that were very interesting. We're actually going to get past some of the numbers now and actually talk about some tech. Well, actually, before we do that, I want to have a discussion with you guys. Let's talk about these numbers. What are your thoughts? Jump in here, guys. I mean, maybe Earl, you've been following the short situation quite a bit. You've been fighting head to head with a lot of the trolls out there. And
yeah, they sure had a lot to say about being out of money by September, then October. Then bankrupt by October.
Keep moving. It's ridiculous.
The goalposts are moving along, and then to see these numbers come out and they just knock it out of the park. What really stands out, what jumps off the page to me, is those 20% margins on the Model 3. I mean, this is the car that the shorts have been saying they can't make money on no matter what, and they're doing it. Production numbers up, their costs are not going up. It's fantastic. So better, I think, than most of the bulls, really Tesla bulls, had even expected. So.
Yeah, they certainly did. They certainly surpassed even my wildest imagination. I was predicting maybe, they'll just get by the skin of their teeth, maybe make $10 million or something like that, or maybe even not even like get so close where, we just missed it by a sliver. In a lot of ways, Elon, up until recently, has been relatively quiet on this situation. He'd been talking about through the whole summer, the short burn of the century is coming, so on and so forth. And then he got real quiet. And a lot of the letters that had leaked to employees and stuff, he says, we're almost there. We're almost there. We're almost there. And I think maybe it was because of the SEC situation that Elon was kind of starting to learn to temper expectations a little bit more. I hope so, because, I hate it when Elon says something and then he has to backtrack. I really can't stand that. So I'm hoping from a financial aspect that they behave a little bit more like Apple in a lot of ways and under forecast and then over deliver, I guess. Maybe that's the right word. So any other thoughts, guys, before we move on to some of the tech stuff? Go ahead.
I think what's interesting is that originally the call was scheduled for sometime to be held later. It would have been held actually last week, and the call came out 2 weeks ago. So there were, it was great to see the numbers being released a bit earlier. That surprised some people, and I think when it was leaked that it was going to be announced earlier, people said, "Oh, the numbers must be good if they're willing to come forward this early on the earnings call." The other thing that sticks out to me is, and you pointed this out in terms of the gross margins and the profitability of the Model 3 and everything else, is that so much of this is really I think a reflection on not just how hard the employees of Tesla worked to put out these number of cars, but also just where the demand is in the electric car market. This is something that, a lot of people have sort of tried to foresee the demise of Tesla for the last several years. The shorts are constantly trying to find ways to just knock the company when they're down. But a company that was once deemed by the auto giants as a David is now itself turning into a Goliath. So it's amazing to see what Tesla's done over the years, that they've really persevered all throughout this time. And they've done something that, in a very short time span, that most companies have taken decades to do.
Yeah, it's taken them a long time, but they're finally here. And, going forward, they also have expectations to be able to maintain good margins, profitability. Elon said that they still don't have intentions of going to the market to raise any money. They think that they are going to be flush. Even, I think it's in the fourth quarter and coming into the first quarter, they have some convertible notes that they have to pay. They do not want to refinance those. They want to be able to pay them off. So, starting to get out from under all that leveraging that they've been doing. Not to say that they can't go to the markets in the future, but I think now that they're on solid footing, that as long as they keep these numbers up, and we don't see any indications of Model 3 demand being a problem in any shape, way, or form. Tesla seems to be very adept at pulling levers for demand in any shape, way, or form. And remember, European deliveries haven't even started yet. Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here and just kind of throw this in there because I know we have some European listeners. In the conference call, they said that they expect to start production of European left-hand drive cars sometime in January, and delivery should happen sometime towards the end of February going into March. Again, no indication as to when right-hand drive will happen. I would believe that, again, we're still talking about mid-2019 for those. And Asia-Pacific countries will, again, be towards the middle of the year. So things are looking good. The ramp is certainly increasing. It certainly has stabilized now. So those are excellent points for those of you that are waiting across the pond. We're finally going to get that car. I think he also said, too, that they expect to hopefully start production of the standard range car around that time frame as well. Now, there was no indication as to when standard range would be available for Europe. They may just do a staged thing as well, where they could start deliveries of those cars, maybe North America, and then eventually go to Europe. We don't know yet. So just keep that in mind. Just because they're starting deliveries doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have the standard range car yet. So just want to put that caveat out there and just to temper expectations a little bit. Unfortunately, they give us a little bit of information, but then, some people just don't go quite deep enough to find out more stuff. So as this stuff kind of progresses, I think we'll have even better information towards the end of the fourth quarter at the next earnings call to really get some better ideas as to where they stand for production and deliveries for other countries. FineLab has a line of protective coatings that were engineered to protect your Tesla's paint, leather, carpet, plastic, and wheels, effectively blocking all those UV rays and environmental factors before they ever get to ruin your brand new baby. FineLab offers a complete line of car care products and ceramic coatings for both the do-it-yourselfer and professional detailers. Did we mention we also have the world's first self-healing coating? Check us out at finelab.com, that's spelled FEYNLAB, to see the science behind the self-healing. Check out our product catalog and click Contact Us for a free quote from a certified installer in your area. FineLab and Tesla. We were meant for each other. So part of the other call too, and this is an observation that I've noted with Elon over the last two financial calls that they've done, is that, I think it's partly it was an effort initially to try and throw a curveball at some of the shorts, because in a vacuum when there's no information, the shorts really run rampant on some of this stuff. And what I noticed is that Elon has been bringing experts in from Tesla into some of these financial calls and letting them talk about some of the stuff that is working behind the scenes, namely Autopilot. Autopilot was the big feature, of course, when they let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, about the new Autopilot hardware that's coming, version 3 as everybody's calling it. That is still slated for production to start happening very early in the first quarter of 2019. He had a couple of people come on, Stuart Bowers and Pete Bannon. These guys are responsible for both the software and the hardware on the Autopilot 3. And they said that qualification of the chips, the boards, the production lines is progressing very well. So they're very much on track to be able to deliver the cars starting in the first quarter of 2019 with that hardware built in. They also made a very big point of making sure that people understood that the Autopilot 3 computer system is fully upgradable, and you will get the computer upgrade for free, but only if you purchased full self-driving. So that's critically important. Either you buy it at the time of purchase or you buy it off menu, but you must have that in order to qualify for the upgrade. Largely because the neural network, which is the second part that they started getting in on, has exceeded their expectations as far as computational power is concerned. So they need more computational power in the car. They can train lots of large neural networks. Andre Kaparthi got on the financial call to talk about his responsibility inside of Tesla for training the neural vision system that they're using. And their computer systems, their simulations are very capable of dealing with that information. However, they felt that full self-driving needs more horsepower, which is why they started this project about 3 years ago. So it's coming, but if you want it, you're going to have to... Earl, you're in a good position. You'll be able to get the upgrade for free when the time comes.
That's why I pulled the trigger. I was worried that they're going to start rolling out features and do some sort of weird Tesla thing where, well, now the price goes up or some sort of a change. So I just wanted to lock it in. Actually, I talked to last week an Ars Technica story came out, and they interviewed a few people. I got in on that to talk about our experience with upgrading to full self-driving, what it was like, why we did that. And it's a pretty fair article because everybody they reached out to is actually okay with it. But of course, this is another thing getting spun in the media as full self-driving has disappeared and everybody's really upset about it. But I really don't think that's the case. We'll see how it goes. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful we'll see something soon.
I found it interesting too, in light of the experts that they brought in inside the company, that the topic of this cross country's full self-driving demonstration didn't even come up once. It seems to be really put on the back burner. However, I do believe that this hardware and this new development that they want to do for the vision-based system is going to be a catalyst for them to finally get to that point where they can actually do that. So I think, up until that happens, they've kind of stuck it on the back burner as far as that's
Elon
concerned.
seems authentically excited about that new chip coming out.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've kind of taken, in a lot of ways, they've taken a lot of things out of Apple's playbook, is that they don't want to be beholden to anyone. Like if they really want the horsepower and they want to be able to move ahead, they have to do their own silicon. They have to be vertically integrated and go that way. So, Let's see here. Anything else? Some other stuff that they started talking about. They made a big point of talking about vehicle safety. They brought Madan Gopal. He's been at Tesla for 10 years, and he's been responsible for all of the safety engineering on the Tesla vehicles. And they spent a considerable amount of time talking about Model 3. It's not the first time I've heard Elon say this, but he did say that other car manufacturers, because the testing of vehicles as far as crash safety is concerned is a known thing, like it's essentially, call it half a dozen tests, is that a lot of the manufacturers, I'm not saying everyone, but a good number of manufacturers kind of game the system in such a way, because they know what they need to pass the test, that they will do what's required so that the cars pass those tests and don't go any further than that. And Madan and both Elon made a very big point of mentioning that they anti-game the system. And what they say is basically they go find the weakest point on the car, and that's where they focus their energies on in order to make it safer. And because of that, that's why the cars get a full 5-star rating in every category. I thought that was really, it's not the first time I heard him say it, but I'm glad that he had mentioned it again. They also made a big point about talking about two other things. One of them was about the hood. Now, not a lot of people know this, but the hoods on the Model S, the X, and the 3 are designed in such a way that they lessen the impact if you hit a pedestrian, so at fairly low speed, in such a way that when the pedestrian hits the hood, that it automatically unbuckles and heads up like this. So it actively helps with the impact. And the other part that they talked about is now that they have this neural network, largely in version 9, really alive and awake because it's using all 8 cameras now, that they are going to start working on more active safety features with the neural network and these cameras, because now they can predict more things that are happening because the car can see 360 degrees now. So they can not only do the emergency braking for frontal collisions, that they can also detect possible impacts coming from the rear and potentially use the neural network system to get you out of those situations. So that's their next area of focus. I'm sure they haven't really mentioned it, but they are starting to get into that, and they mentioned that was the other challenge that they wanted to tackle next. So it really shows that they take safety very seriously, and I'm glad for that, because this is, we're all driving the safest cars on the road now, which is wonderful. And I heard somebody on Twitter, and I forget where I saw it, but one of the things that it might have been Elon himself, that one of the best selling points of the Teslas now is really safety. You can talk about the techs all day long, but safety is the number one thing. I think they probably outpaced Volvo in a lot, because Volvo's always been saving safest cars on the road. Well, not anymore.
Yeah, I can say when I talk to I'm sorry, Eric, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to say that the one takeaway from the entire presentation regarding safety was that they essentially start with the weakest part of the vehicle and go from there. Mm-hmm. So if you're always reinforcing the weakest part, you're eventually going to have nothing but a safe vehicle all around. And to see the Model 3 is essentially exceed the Model S and its original tests is amazing.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, for my wife, she's not all that excited about things like Autopilot, Atari games, what the car looks like. But when you talk about safety, then that really rings through. She thinks about that with our family and our kids in the car. And I think that's a brilliant move to really make the safest car. I think it's a great selling point.
Yeah, and I think it really comes to the point why he brought in these experts, because they actually see safety as like one of the number one items on the whiteboard for their cars, as far as design is concerned. So when Tesla says from now on, they have 3 cars now, and they've said they're going to get 5-star rating, and they have achieved it. So, you can't really, you got to give them the benefit of the doubt now. If they come out with the pickup and the Model Y and all the other cars and say they're going to be the safest cars, well, you better darn well believe it now. Let's see here. JB Straubel was on the call. Now, for those of you who don't know, JB is the battery brains. He's one of the early starters of the company. He's been with the company since day one. JB largely works at the Gigafactory, maintaining all the production lines and the cell production and working with relations with Panasonic. And he usually comes on the call, and he had some interesting information to divulge. He said over the last several weeks, they said that there was a new production for cells that was installed, and they're going to have another by the end of the year, and then another after that. So Gigafactory is scaling incredibly well. They are currently sitting at 20 gigawatts per year at the Gigafactory. They also started talking a little bit about China because, if you haven't heard, Tesla has secured the land in China, and they finally have broken ground. So the Gigafactory in China is actually happening. Now, they wanted to make sure that people understood that long-term cell production will happen in China, but short-term is kind of uncertain. So I largely believe, and they also mentioned about the start of production at the Chinese Gigafactory will be very capital efficient, largely saying that they were going to take lessons that they learned from what they did in Fremont, namely the tent, if for lack of a better word. And that's where they will start production. So instead of really, in the way that I read this, is that instead of waiting for the complete shell to be finished at the Gigafactory, they may set up some exterior temporary production lines and actually start building cars for the local market. Now, it's important to remember that Tesla has no intentions on building cars in China for North American market. They want to build these cars for the Asian Pacific market. So they will use sort of like a tent type structure to actually start production for those cars as soon as possible. So the other thing you can take away from that is that largely a lot of parts will actually be imported into China. That may be a way to get around some of the import duties and stuff, because I don't know what the breakdown is, but there may be a certain percentage where the vehicle actually has to be built in China, not necessarily completely manufactured from a parts perspective. So, and that kind of goes back to what they said about cell production. Cell production they want to do in China, but short term they just can't because, the Gigafactory has taken essentially 3 years to really get up and running. They don't have that kind of time. So that's what they said about that. They also said early China production will be, let me see here, significant progress on, they expect to build Model 3 and Model Y in China. S and X will stay in Fremont. It just doesn't make sense, I guess, at this point to do that. Some other information that came out of the situation was they said that they made some significant progress on Model Y. In fact, Elon said that he signed off on getting production started on the very first prototype. Now, that's building the first prototype. That's not producing cars en masse, whatever, because they need a certain amount of leeway or lead time before a reveal, which is, on average, I've heard Elon say it takes them anywhere from 5 to 6 months to build a rolling prototype. So that's what we're looking at. So if the timing works out, like we're November 1st now, so, 5 months, 6 months, we're looking at March. That's been kind of the number that's been floating around, that the reveal may happen in March for the Model Y. So we're keeping a very good eye on that, and hopefully we'll be able to get to go to the reveal in March or very early spring anyways, at least when that happens.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be party time. Largely, that will not be in Fremont, by the way. That'll be in Hawthorne, because that's where they do vehicle reveals, as at the design studio, because that's the only way they can maintain secrecy. SpaceX, yes, SpaceX is right next door. No tours of SpaceX, unfortunately. There are come on! Now there's rules, man. There's rules. If anybody can get us in on a SpaceX tour, please get in touch with us. We'd love. We would be
friends for life.
Yes, exactly.
I will divulge a secret. We had one of the SpaceX engineers at my offices about a month ago.
Oh, any juicy tidbits?
Our company president is good friends with one. No, not really. It was kind of a whirlwind, like we cross paths type of thing. I will definitely work that angle though.
We all have a SpaceX. I mean, when I was in San Francisco last year on vacation, I was on the bus and there was this young lady and her boyfriend, whatever, and she looked at me. She says, "I think I know you." I said, "Well, maybe. I don't know." She says, "Oh, you do a YouTube thing." I said, Yeah, I watch your show." She says, "I'm a SpaceX engineer." Really? She says, yeah, I'm just down here on whatever and stuff. So I thought, it's one and only time I ever met somebody from SpaceX. So anyways, whoever you are, it was very nice to meet you. Good job. Keep up the great work. Anyways, get back to the show here. Right. So again, just reiterating, no equity debt raise or short terms. They want to pay off their debts as soon as possible, which is really good. So, right. One other bit that he talked about was the situation at Tesla that he found unacceptable, and that has to do with deliveries of vehicles. He says currently, right now, after reviewing everything, it's taking about 30 days from production to get the cars out to customers. He felt that was unacceptable. During the last third quarter, they had been able to get that number down to about 20 days, And their goal, and they said it's not a promise, but their goal was to get that down from 20 days down to 10 days, which I think is excellent because, listen, the internet and the forum are rife with all kinds of issues as far as deliveries are concerned. And I want to talk about deliveries with you guys for a little bit because it is still a bit of a sticking point. We are largely out of production hell. We're now in delivery hell. And I find it interesting, and I want you guys to chime in on this, but I find it interesting that Tesla didn't really seem to have spent a lot of time thinking about the whole delivery process or how they were going to scale this thing. They seem to be so focused on getting Model 3 production up that how they were going to deliver these cars and stage them and get them out was almost like a secondhand thought or something. And I've seen my share of issues. I mean, Ian and I certainly experienced it when he took delivery of his car. We had problems with paperwork, and that seemed to be a rampant problem. Now, I haven't seen delivery since, Ian was the last one that I participated in. I'm hoping that it's been largely sorted out, but we're still seeing issues on the forum pop up. What do you guys think about this? I mean, where do you think Tesla could improve on this situation?
Well, I'd say number one is getting a handle on the volume of transporters that they need. I mean, I don't know who exactly got their hands on my car, but the front bumper would evidence that probably leans more towards Attila the Hun rather than Mr. Velvet Glove. I was lucky. I mean, there's hardly any marks on the car, but there's definitely a chunk of paint missing on the bumper.
Well, that looked like it was we looked at that and we thought it might have been a strap or something from transportation.
That's exactly what I think it was. And, it just spoke to me. It's like, okay, they must have had to, really scrape the bottom of the barrel for whoever they could get to deliver the car. And I understand that. I mean, but it's like you said, Trevor, it's kind of like it was almost afterthought, I think is the word that you were looking for. And I think it's just they're in such an all hands on deck mode to get the cars out. And there's just X number of people available. But you could see that right across the entire food chain there. Anytime I wanted to get a hold of customer service to discuss anything in those last few weeks, it was like waiting days to get an email or a phone call back. And that had never been my experience before. And it hasn't been my experience since, like when I had to deal with them over the fact that I was not getting the free supercharging, I got almost instantaneous responses on that. So it was just in those last few weeks of September that everything just seemed to be pushed way beyond the red line. And hopefully they're reeling it back in now. And I mean, Elon's came straight out and said, we're now experiencing delivery hell. And I think it's just because you have X number of people in the company and they're trying to exponentially ramp the number of deliveries in a short period of time. And they just did the absolute best they could with the very limited amount of staff they had. That's really all I can attribute it to.
Yeah.
And they were pulling people from every which way they could. I mean, you could have worked in energy, you could work in a different department. Almost sudden now you're being hands-on with delivery. So it was a very interesting time with the company. I don't want to be disingenuous to Tesla. I think they put a lot of thought into what they were doing. I just think it maybe might have been overwhelming. Might have been greater numbers in those last few weeks. And so with the amount of inventory orders, with the amount of Model 3 deliveries, I think a lot of the time it was just, we got to move all these cars, and people were ordering whatever car they could get, maybe from different markets. And so there was just a lot of logistics involved. They had to pull in different people. I mean, look, if the Tesla Semi was around, I'm sure it'd be a lot easier to get these things moved around. But I think, and this is something I think is historical with Tesla. They'll do something, learn from what it does, find out what worked, what didn't work, find processes that will be improved upon, and then take it from there to sort of circumvent the possibility of it ever happening again. So I agree, and they may not even be full out of it this year. I mean, we know that in the U.S., the federal tax credit incentive of $7,500 may drive a lot of people to getting an inventory car in the next 8 weeks. We know the cutoff date for people ordering a car now is, for the U.S., approaching essentially right now. If you live in the East Coast like I do, and you want to order a car, you're looking at an 8-week delivery window. Well, it's November 1st. 8 weeks puts you the very last week of December. So we may see it happen again in a few weeks, but hopefully by that point, Tesla will be all the better for it.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, because one of the things that I did have a chance to do here was actually talk to someone at Tesla this week when I was down there, and I mentioned about the thing about the third quarter, and I said, I don't think it's sustainable for you guys to keep pushing so hard at the end of the quarters. He says, no, it's not. But he led me to believe that internally that there are some efforts internally to smooth this out. I had asked him about the situation because here in Toronto, I mean, there's so many cars being delivered, of course, that they temporarily hire the International Center, which is a large, basically conference center where they do these deliveries. And he sent, I mean, and I was just down at the local shop, and I mean, the place was just full of Model 3s. I've never seen that many before in that single location, and they're still moving cars there. So they're kind of leading me to believe that they're going to have most of this stuff smoothed out, and largely they may not have to go to these extreme measures. And I hope so for their fate, because they really got to move these cars. Oh, wow. Lots of things going on. Anything else you guys want to chime in on?
No, I think, just to jump in on what Eric said, I think of all the things from production, development of the car, the software they have in there, they'll figure this out. I mean, I think they'll get it running better than anybody else. And like Elon had broken down on the earnings call, this is going to be a big cost saver too. The quicker they can get them out of the factory and into your hands will be a big deal for them to be able to do and make more profit off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was talked about during the call that, if they have $1.5 million of vehicles sitting in a lot, it's $1.5 million of money they're not making. So it's imperative that they get these vehicles moved. One other thing I think is also really great from the earnings call, if I recall correctly, is that they also talked about the future plans of their Tesla fleet for essentially a rideshare program. I think that's the next big thing to come from the company, which, again, this sort of ties into the conversation we had earlier about the cars parking themselves and auto summon and that sort of thing. It's if you're someone who says, listen, I'm all for what Tesla's doing. Maybe I just can't afford a car. I live in a city where a car is not conducive. It's not helpful. Be able to get a rideshare program. The cars just drive themselves, pick you up, et cetera, et cetera. Or if you own a Tesla, you want to make some extra cash on the side and you're using your vehicle to do that for the rideshare, that's a very big thing if it's able to come to fruition in the next, say, 3 to 5 years. That's it. That's all I got. There you
go. We always appreciate your input, Eric. You have some very good ideas in your head. Yeah, they did make a point of talking about some of the future plans, and I think what really boils down to is Elon seems to be pretty excited about some of the changes that are coming as far as Autopilot's concerned. I mean, kind of going back to what we said before, where the hardware 3 is coming. Their neural network's finally in place. We've seen some incredible improvements. I mean, this Navigate on Autopilot, which I have not experienced in person yet, but I've seen plenty of YouTube videos, is astounding. And it's only going to get better. I mean, version 9 has been quite a bit buggy. We've talked about this on the show before. But we've seen several software updates that are coming that have been deployed that are starting to make some improvements on this. So
people are excited. There's some great videos out there with people using the new software. I can't wait to get it.
Well, I think that brings us really to the end of today's show. I apologize for the skipping of last week and stuff, but hey, sometimes schedules get in conflict with things. So I want to give you guys an opportunity to let our viewers and our listeners out there where they can get a hold of you. How about you go first there, Earl? Where can people find you if they wanted to have a chit-chat with you?
Oh, yeah, the best place to find me is at 28 Delays Later on Twitter or just at Frunk Puppy. Of course, every week is Frunk Puppy Friday. If you post a pic of your pet in the Frunk and use that hashtag, you can get in to maybe make the final 4. We now vote on who's the best, and by doing that, you can now win prizes. So this week we have a screen protector from Alon Accessories, and it's been really great, a lot of fun. The other thing, too, you could check out on Saturday, Teslarati did an article about Frunk Puppy, kind of the background, a little bit of my story, too. It's a fun read, so I'd encourage you to check that out. And that's about it. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem. Anytime. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, I will put this out a little bit. The screen protector that they have is excellent. I just put out a video because I broke mine.
I saw a picture of that.
So they very kindly sent me another one. They said, "Hey, no problem," and stuff. It's partly our fault because of the instructions. I said, "No, it's this dude screwed it up." So, anyways, they're going to get that rectified. But so far, even the broken one, I have it on my screen. I love it very much. All right, Ian Pavelko, where can people find you if they want to have a chit chat with you, buddy?
Well, easiest place is Twitter. at Ian Pavelko. The handle is Mad Hungarian. And you can also find me on Model 3 Owners Club forum under the handle Mad Hungarian. And I'm there mostly talking about wheels and tires.
Hey, there's Norman. Sorry about that.
A little hectic. So I'll try and get back to you. But if you private message me on M3OC, I'll always answer. I'll always try to get back to you within 24 hours. And then lastly, there's my T-shirt project, which I believe Mr. Camacho is modeling as well as me to this evening. I have my Weapons of Mass Adoption hoodie on. So you can find those on teespring.com. Just look up Mad Hungarian Evolveware on Teespring, and you have a full selection of this and the original Evolve models as well. And that all goes to a good cause, of course, the various EV organizations that the Profits are supporting.
If you want one of the shirts, link will be in the video or the podcast description. Eric, you're wearing one tonight. You can show everybody your shirt.
I am wearing one tonight, the infamous Weapons of Mass Adoption. Yes.
Love that shirt. Such a great thing. As usual, where can people chit-chat with you, Eric?
Sure. So you guys can find me on Twitter at the handle ECFix. That's I do want to give my thanks to Michael Bodner. He certainly helped make the show an amazing show, and we all wish him the best of luck, as we said in the outside of this podcast. But also, I'm jumping ahead here. Thanks to all of our Patreon supporters. Thanks to our sponsors. Without you, we couldn't do the show. And our thanks to our special guest of the week, Earl, who, if you guys are listening to us in the podcast, go to the YouTube video, because at the very end of this video, we have a special guest who just came onto the podcast.
Yeah, we had to get Norman on here for once. You know?
Right. So the official model of Front Puppy.
This is the real
show.
Attraction of tonight's episode. Hands down.
Never before seen on video.
Yeah.
Right.
Other than driving my car.
Yeah, the dog has no idea what's going on. It's just like, what are all these voices and people? I don't understand.
Where's the front?
Excellent. Well, I want to say thanks to everybody for joining us again tonight, as usual. My name is Trevor. I'm the host of the show. You can find me on Twitter. My handle is Model3, at Model3Owners. Don't forget to check out the forum at Model3OwnersClub.com. Membership is free. Again, big thank you to all of our Patreon sponsors. They're the guys that really make this whole thing happen. You can find that at patreon.com/Model3OwnersClub. Every little bit helps, keeps the show going. I want to say a big shout out and thank you to our sponsors, Evanex, Fine Lab, and Duliban Insurance. So if you're looking for those products from those companies, check them out. Very good people. And last but not least, I might as well put a little plug out there. If you're looking to buy a Model S or Model 3, or even a Model S, or Model X, I should say, feel free to use our referral code. That's Trevor41818. Every little bit helps us get us to that Roadster, and there's some progress being made there. And that gets you 6 months of free supercharging. So that's it for tonight. Thanks for joining in, everybody, and we'll catch you on the next one. We'll see you later.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.